The creator of Death Note said he always planned to kill L. In another interview, he admitted he was re-evaluating available choices and decided tearfully, but one of those was a lie. And the reason he had to lie tells you everything about why the second half of it fell off. Because it wasn't just bad writing or lazy creators, it was $80 million in film revenue, and a magazine that couldn't afford to let its biggest hit end at just chapter 58. By the end of this video, you'll know who needed Death Note to keep going after L died, and why the creators used their next manga to write the ending they wished they had gotten.
If you were me, faced with someone who might be Kira, how would you go about establishing this person's innocence or guilt? You need to be absolutely sure.
I would probably try to get him to say something that was never made public in any way, something that only Kira could know.
Back in December 2003, writer Tsugumi Ohba and artist Takeshi Obata launched a psychological thriller in weekly Shonen Jump, a magazine known for fighting tournaments and friendship speeches. And Death Note had no business succeeding there. But the Light vs. L duel was structurally perfect. Two geniuses locked in one room, one notebook between them, and an audience that could never fully decide who to root for. By 2005, Death Note was one of Jump's biggest active properties, moving millions of volumes. Kids were writing classmates' names in Death Note notebooks at school. Hot Topic was moving Death Note merch as fast as they could stock it. And the series had crossed over from manga hit to genuine pop culture event. Now, most people will tell you the second half failed because Near and Mello weren't as good as L. That's not wrong, but it skips the question that actually matters. Why were Near and Mello even there at all? They were a business decision, one made inside Shueisha's editorial offices between 2005 and 2006 by the one person who sat between the publisher and the creators. Here's something most fans don't think about. At Weekly Shonen Jump, manga creators didn't just write and submit. Every series ran through an assigned editor who functioned as both creative collaborator and commercial enforcer. That editor greenlit plot turns, relayed reader survey data, and represented the magazine's financial interests at the creator's desk. Ohba himself said in interviews that he and Obata communicated through their editor rather than directly. Think about what that means. That editor wasn't just a middleman. He was the exact point where Shueisha's business needs became story decisions, and Shueisha needed Death Note badly. Weekly Shonen Jump had peaked at 6.5 million copies per week in 1995, but by 2006, circulation had dropped to 2.75 million. The magazine was bleeding readers, and Death Note was one of the few prestige properties keeping the brand culturally relevant. On top of that, the first live-action film pulled $31 million. The sequel, released just 5 months later, pulled $50. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Japan was packaging this thing for international distribution. Konami had 3 Nintendo DS games in production timed to the franchise's peak. An anime adaptation was greenlit through a production committee called DN Dream Partners, which looped in Nippon TV and VAP for broadcast and home video rights. And all of that infrastructure was built on the assumption that new chapters would keep coming. But back in mid-2005, the story's natural climax was already written. L died, Light won, and the duel was over. Now, remember those contradictory statements from Ohba? Here's the context. A 2007 Salon Review reported an industry rumor that Death Note was originally supposed to be about half as long, but when serialization proved wildly popular, Ohba and Obata were persuaded to extend it. The ending may have always been planned, but the 50 chapters between L's death and the ending, those were the parts that weren't. And the people who decided Death Note needed to keep going after L died weren't the people who had to figure out how to replace him. That job fell to Ohba alone.
Just watch me, L. I'll solve equations with my right hand and write names with my left.
If Death Note had ended at chapter 58, the story would have been complete. L was dead. Light stood alone as the god of his new world, with no one left who could challenge him. Misa was loyal but hollowed out. The task force was compromised, and Light had won everything he wanted, while losing every piece of his humanity in the process. That's an ending, not a cliffhanger, an ending. But what the extension produced instead was Near and Mello, And Ohba's logic, laid out in the guidebook How to Read 13, was that L alone couldn't defeat Kira, so he created two successors who together could accomplish what L couldn't. On paper, that sounds like it raises the stakes. In practice, splitting one great rival into two just made both halves less compelling. Near was designed as L's intellectual mirror. Same posture, same deductive method, same detachment from social norms. But even Ohba admitted in the guidebook that Near's behavior, intended to reinforce his childishness, had been construed as annoying, and that fans may have seen Near as a cheat or wannabe L. The creator said that in his own guidebook. Meanwhile, Mello was supposed to be the emotional counterweight, the reckless one, the one with fire. But Ohba killed them in a single panel and gave him a deliberately plain death, because a dramatic exit would have telegraphed his importance to Light's downfall. So he sacrificed the character's emotional payoff for a plot mechanic. And if that trade-off doesn't bother you, think about what it actually means. The writer chose a twist over making you feel something. That's not a creative choice. That's a writer who's solving a puzzle he didn't want to be solving. You watched 25 episodes invested in Light versus L. That duel was personal. You knew their habits, their tells, the way L sat in a chair, and the way Light smiled changed when he was lying. And Near and Mello didn't just replace L, they replaced the reason you kept watching. The first half thrived on intimacy. Light and L handcuffed together, sharing screen time, trading internal monologue, arguing ideology across a desk. The second half replaced all of that with corporate thriller geography. Suddenly, the story was scattered across SPK headquarters, the Mafia's operations, the Japanese task force, Mello's safe house, Near's command center, and you're supposed to care equally about Giovanni, Hallie Lidner, Rester, Takata, and Mikami on top of the existing cast. The original story worked because it was tight, while the extension never had that chance, and the team that adapted it knew.
What are you doing?
I thought I might help you out. You were busy wiping yourself off anyway.
When Madhouse adapted Death Note into a 37-episode anime, the studio made a choice that tells you everything. They gave 26 episodes to the first half and crammed the entire Near and Mello arc into the remaining 11. Director Tetsuro Araki went even further. He added anime original scenes to episode 25 that didn't exist in the manga. The rooftop rain sequence, the staircase scene where L knelt down and dried Light's feet. Those weren't filler. They were a director investing his craft in the first half of the show that he knew actually mattered. The audience felt it too. Episode 25, Silence, carries a 9.6 on IMDb, but then episode 26, Renewal, only sits at 7. That's a 2.6 freefall between consecutive episodes, and the reason went deeper than just missing L. The moral debate that powered the first half collapsed entirely. L believed Kira might be wrong but couldn't prove it without becoming morally compromised himself, and that tension animated every scene they shared. You could generally argue either side at 2 AM and not feel stupid about it, but Near didn't carry any of that. He just believed Kira was a serial killer, which was factually correct but dramatically inert, and the philosophical question that made people lose sleep just vanished. What replaced it was a procedural manhunt where you already knew the answer. But the deeper issue was this: Near and Mello didn't exist to serve the story. They existed to solve a problem the story didn't need to have. L's death was the ending. Everything after it was content generated to keep a revenue engine running. And nearly 2 decades later, the most common piece of advice you'll see in any Death Note thread on Reddit or Mal is still, just stop at episode 25. The audience already figured out where the story actually ended without needing anyone to tell them. Even the franchise's own studio eventually confirmed it. After the broadcast ended, Madhouse recut the series into 2 TV films. Visions of a God condensed the first 26 episodes into 130 minutes. Meanwhile, L's successors condensed the final 11 into 93 minutes, 37 minutes shorter. The people who animated Death Note looked at the second half and decided it needed less screen time, not more.
目的は同じだというのにこうも考えが違ってしまうとはままならんもんだなまったくだじゃあなバイセああシュバルツ人類滅亡のゲームの始まりだ
2 years after Death Note ended, Ohba and Obata launched a new series in the same magazine. They called it Bakuman, a manga about making manga at Weekly Shonen Jump. And unlike Death Note, Bakuman was explicitly about their own experiences in the industry. Later in the series, their fictional protagonist created a dark thriller called Reversi, and the parallels were just impossible to miss. A black and white ideological duel between characters named Schwartz and Weiss, a love interest modeled on Misa, a demon that mirrored Ryuk, and Reversi became a massive hit inside the story. Then Jump's editorial department pressured the fictional creators to extend it. The protagonists even considered replacing Weiss with a new villain to keep the series going. But here's the part. In Bakuman, they refused. The fictional creators ended Reversi at its natural climax. Both leads died together in the final chapter, roughly 50 chapters. No successor arc, no extension, no Near and Mello. Ohba and Obata couldn't end Death Note when L died, but they gave their fictional selves the ending they wish they'd had. And I don't think you have to squint to see what that is. They couldn't say it on the record, so they wrote it into someone else's story. They found the courage to let a hit die young, but only on paper, and only through characters who got to make the choice they never could. That's just them telling you. Death Note ended twice. The version Ohba wanted to write ended when L died, but the version you watched kept going because in 2006, Shueisha needed it to. The films needed runway, the games needed chapters, the production committee needed content, and the story paid for all of it. So next time you rewatch Death Note, the question isn't whether the second half is worse. You already know that. The question is whether you're going to keep watching the machine's version or the creators. And if you think Death Note is the only franchise Jump squeezed past its expiration date, that's a story for next time.